After 16 years of military service as a special operations sniper, I wanted nothing more than peace and quiet. Retirement from active duty meant I could finally provide stability for my daughter, Lily. She was born with spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that progressively weakened her muscles and confined her to a wheelchair by age 12. Despite her physical limitations, her spirit remained unbreakable. Her smile could light up even my darkest days, reminding me what I had fought for all those years overseas. We found our dream home in Oak Ridge Estates, a suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and manicured lawns. The house needed modifications for Lily's accessibility, but the bones were good. I calculated that with my military pension and new civilian job as a security consultant, we could afford the necessary renovations to make it perfect for her needs. The day we moved in, neighbors brought welcome baskets and offered help unloading boxes. One couple even brought their children over specifically to introduce them to Lily, understanding that making friends would be important for her. For the first 3 weeks, everything seemed perfect. Lily enrolled in the local high school, which had an excellent program for students with physical disabilities. I began settling into civilian routines, mowing the lawn on weekends, greeting neighbors during evening walks with Lily, attending a neighborhood barbecue. The transition felt smoother than I had dared hope. My hypervigilance, a souvenir from deployments, began to fade. For the first time in years, I slept without checking the locks twice. That false sense of security shattered on a Tuesday morning when I found an official notice taped to our front door. The letter, printed on Homeowners Association letterhead, cited us for unapproved exterior modifications and demanded immediate removal of the temporary aluminum ramp I had installed for Lily's wheelchair. The notice was signed by Patricia Winters, HOA president. I called the number listed and arranged a meeting, assuming this was a simple misunderstanding. The following afternoon, Patricia Winters arrived at our door precisely at the scheduled time. She stood on our porch with a clipboard, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a tailored blazer despite the summer heat. Her smile did not reach her eyes as she introduced herself. "Mr. Mitchell, I am Patricia Winters, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I understand you wanted to discuss your violation notice," she said, her voice carrying the practiced politeness of someone accustomed to getting her way. I invited her inside, offering water or coffee, which she declined with a dismissive wave of her hand. As we sat in the living room, I explained Lily's condition and our need for the wheelchair ramp. I had blueprints ready to show her the permanent ramp I planned to build, designed to blend with the house aesthetics. "While I sympathize with your situation, Mr. Mitchell, rules are rules," she said, looking around our home with thinly veiled judgment. "All exterior modifications require prior board approval. The aluminum ramp is an eyesore that decreases property values." Just as I was about to respond, Lily wheeled herself into the room, returning from school. Patricia barely acknowledged her presence, continuing to explain how I should have requested permission before installation. The way she spoke over Lily, as if my daughter were invisible, sent a warning signal through my system. "The temporary ramp stays until the permanent one is approved and built," I stated calmly but firmly. "My daughter needs to access her home safely." Patricia's expression hardened. "Then I suggest you expedite your application process, Mr. Mitchell. The board meets monthly, and the next meeting is in 3 weeks. Until then, you are accruing daily fines." As she left, I noticed how the neighbors across the street quickly turned away when Patricia glanced in their direction. Another neighbor who had been walking his dog suddenly changed course when he saw her exit our house. Their reactions were subtle but unmistakable, the kind of behavior I had seen in villages under the control of local warlords. Fear. That night, as I helped Lily with her homework, I casually asked about the neighborhood kids and whether anyone had mentioned the HOA. Her response confirmed my suspicions. "Dad, nobody talks about Mrs. Winters except in whispers. Tyler from science class said his parents had to repaint their entire house because she said the color was 3 shades too blue." I nodded, filing away this information. My instincts, the same ones that had kept me alive through 4 deployments, were quietly alerting me that Patricia Winters represented a different kind of threat than I had anticipated in this peaceful suburb. Not dangerous yet, but definitely someone to watch. The weeks following our first encounter with Patricia brought a barrage of HOA citations, each more nitpicky than the last. Our grass was 4.2 inches tall when the maximum allowed was 4 inches. The American flag displayed on our porch was mounted at an incorrect angle. The flowers Lily had planted along the walkway were not on the approved vegetation list. Each violation came with escalating fines that were being added to our HOA account. I submitted the formal application for our permanent wheelchair ramp, complete with architectural drawings and material specifications. The documents emphasized how the design would match our home's exterior colors and style. While waiting for the next board meeting, I continued using the temporary aluminum ramp despite the accumulating fines. Lily needed to get in and out of our home, and no amount of HOA pressure would change that basic necessity. One morning, I was helping Lily into the car for school when our elderly neighbor, Mr. Grayson, shuffled over. He glanced nervously up and down the street before speaking to me in a low voice. "Listen, Mitchell, I should warn you about Patricia. She drove the Hendersons out last year when their son got cancer. They installed a hospital bed in their living room that was visible from the window, and she claimed it violated the residential character clause. Just watch your back." Before I could ask for more details, he quickly walked away. Throughout that day, his warning lingered in my mind. When I picked Lily up from school, I decided to drive around the neighborhood instead of heading straight home. I pointed out houses to Lily, asking casual questions about the families who lived there. "That blue house with the basketball hoop, I think a boy from your grade lives there, right?" "That was Dylan's house. They moved away during winter break," Lily explained. "His mom got into a huge fight with Mrs. Winters at a board meeting about their basketball hoop. She said mean things about Dylan being too noisy." By the end of our drive, Lily had innocently revealed 4 more families who had moved away following conflicts with Patricia. A pattern was emerging, and it concerned me deeply. The following weekend, I installed security cameras around our property, positioning them strategically to cover all approaches. My military training in surveillance proved useful as I ensured comprehensive coverage without creating obvious blind spots. I synchronized the system with my phone to receive instant alerts of any unusual activity. That vigilance paid off sooner than expected. At 5:47 the next morning, my phone buzzed with an alert. The front yard camera had detected movement. I watched the live feed as Patricia Winters, dressed in running clothes, methodically measured our grass with a ruler. She took photos with her phone, then moved to inspect our temporary ramp, taking more pictures from multiple angles. Her face showed an unsettling satisfaction as she documented what she clearly considered violations. The incident confirmed what I had suspected. This was not random enforcement but targeted harassment. Over the next 2 weeks, security footage captured Patricia or her husband driving by our house multiple times daily, far more frequently than normal neighborhood traffic patterns would explain. 3 times, she was recorded taking photographs of our home, once bringing another board member to point out alleged infractions. The monthly HOA meeting arrived, and I attended with comprehensive documentation of our accessibility needs, copies of the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines, and photos of our proposed permanent ramp design. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, with about 30 residents attending. Patricia sat at the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other board members who rarely spoke unless prompted by her. When my application came up for discussion, I presented my case calmly and professionally. I explained Lily's condition and the necessity of the ramp, emphasizing how the permanent design would enhance rather than detract from the neighborhood aesthetics. Several neighbors nodded in agreement as I spoke. Patricia waited until I finished before responding, her voice carrying artificial sympathy that did not match her cold eyes. While we all feel for your daughter's situation, Mr. Mitchell, this board has a responsibility to maintain community standards. The proposed ramp extends 16 inches beyond the permitted setback from the sidewalk. Additionally, the materials do not match the approved list for external structures. I remained standing, maintaining eye contact with each board member as I replied. The setback variance is necessary for the proper slope required by HOA guidelines. As for materials, I have selected options from your approved list, with the only difference being the non-slip surface coating required for wheelchair safety. A murmur of support rippled through the audience. Sensing this, Patricia's demeanor shifted abruptly. Mr. Mitchell, I do not appreciate your combative approach. This board will not be bullied by technical jargon or veiled threats of HOA complaints. Your application is denied pending significant revisions. Furthermore, the board is implementing a special assessment for legal consultation regarding your continued noncompliance with the existing violations. The room fell silent. I remained composed, drawing on years of remaining calm under pressure in combat situations. For clarity, Mrs. Winters, are you denying reasonable accommodation for a disabled resident? Because that decision has significant legal implications for the HOA. Her face flushed with anger as she responded, "Are you threatening legal action against this board?" "I am simply stating facts about federal disability law that supersedes HOA regulations," I replied evenly. Patricia abruptly called the meeting to adjournment, but not before I noticed several neighbors looking at me with newfound respect. Others appeared fearful of the confrontation, but nodded subtly as I packed up my documents. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I spread the HOA covenant documents across the dining table alongside printouts of federal and state disability laws. My military training had taught me that understanding the terrain was crucial before any operation. This battle would be fought with paperwork and legal precedents rather than weapons, but the strategic principles remained the same. I began highlighting relevant sections and taking detailed notes, preparing for what was clearly becoming a sustained campaign rather than a simple disagreement. After extensive research, I scheduled a consultation with Diana Chen, an attorney specializing in disability rights law. Her office was located downtown, decorated with framed court decisions and awards from disability advocacy organizations. She listened intently as I detailed the situation with Patricia and the HOA, occasionally making notes and asking precise questions about timelines and documentation. "You were right to come to me, Mr. Mitchell," she said after reviewing my materials. "The Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act are quite clear on this matter. Homeowners associations cannot prevent reasonable modifications required for disabled residents, regardless of their aesthetic guidelines." She explained the legal process, which would begin with a formal demand letter to the HOA board outlining their legal obligations. If they failed to comply, we would file a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and potentially a civil lawsuit. Diana emphasized the importance of continuing to document all interactions and maintaining composure throughout the process. These cases are won with paper trails and patience, she advised. Keep your security cameras running. Save every notice, record dates and times of all encounters. And most importantly, continue following all other HOA rules meticulously so they cannot claim this is about anything other than disability accommodation. I left her office with a clear action plan and the first draft of a strongly worded legal notice that would be sent to the HOA board. For the first time since our troubles began, I felt a sense of control returning. This was familiar territory, identifying an objective, gathering intelligence, and executing a strategic plan. 2 days later, Diana sent the official letter to the HOA board via certified mail, with copies to each individual board member. The letter cited specific violations of federal law, precedent cases with similar circumstances, and potential penalties if they continued their discriminatory practices. We requested a response within 10 business days and immediate approval of the wheelchair ramp application. I expected escalation from Patricia, but not the form it took. The following Thursday, I had a morning meeting with a client that ran longer than anticipated. As I drove home, I received a frantic call from Lily. "Dad, there are men taking apart our ramp. I cannot get inside the house." Her voice trembled with panic and confusion. I pressed the accelerator, instructing Lily to remain in the car with the doors locked until I arrived. 15 minutes later, I pulled into our driveway to find a construction crew dismantling our temporary aluminum ramp. Lily sat in our car, tears streaming down her face as she watched her access to our home being removed. The crew's supervisor approached as I exited my vehicle. "Sorry, sir. We have orders from the HOA to remove this unauthorized structure," he said, handing me a work order signed by Patricia Winters. "This is my daughter's only way to enter our home," I stated, struggling to maintain my composure as I saw Lily's distress. "Who authorized this without notifying the homeowner?" Board President Winters said all notifications were properly delivered, he replied uncomfortably, clearly sensing he was caught in the middle of something problematic. I pulled out my phone and called Diana Chen on speakerphone, explaining the situation while the crew supervisor listened. Diana's voice was sharp with controlled anger. "That is a clear violation of both property rights and potentially federal disability law. They cannot remove accessibility features without court order, regardless of HOA rules." She addressed the supervisor directly. "Sir, I advise you to cease work immediately. Continuing could make you personally liable in the lawsuit we will be filing this afternoon." The supervisor signaled his crew to stop work, but the damage was already done. The ramp was half dismantled, with pieces scattered across our front yard, rendering it unusable. I thanked Diana and ended the call, then turned to the crew. "Please leave my property now. Take photos if you need documentation of why the job is incomplete." After they departed, I carried Lily from the car into the house. At 15, she was embarrassed by needing to be carried, but there was no alternative. The humiliation on her face as neighbors watched from behind curtains crystallized my resolve. This had crossed from bureaucratic harassment into something directly harmful to my daughter. That evening, an emergency HOA board meeting was called to discuss the Mitchell situation. A sympathetic neighbor texted me that Patricia was rallying the board to approve funds for legal defense against potential action from us. I did not attend, instead focusing on constructing a temporary wooden ramp so Lily could access our home independently again. As I worked under portable lights in the growing darkness, a car slowed in front of our house. Instead of passing, it parked across the street. Through the shadows, I recognized Betty Alvarez, one of the quieter HOA board members. She approached cautiously, looking over her shoulder several times. "Mr. Mitchell," she said softly, "I want you to know not everyone on the board supports what Patricia is doing. The meeting tonight was disturbing. She was not rational about your situation, making accusations about you trying to destroy the community's standards. When Thomas suggested we should simply approve your ramp given the legal implications, she shouted him down, saying she would not be intimidated by military types who think rules do not apply to them." Betty handed me a folded piece of paper before continuing in an even lower voice. "Patricia keeps guns in her house. Her husband is a collector, but she carries one sometimes in her purse. She has been talking about you constantly, saying you are dangerous. Please be careful." With that warning, she hurried back to her car and drove away. The note contained a simple message. "She has guns and talks about you constantly. Be careful." That night, I installed a comprehensive security system throughout our property: motion sensors, additional cameras covering all blind spots, entry alerts on all doors and windows, and a direct connection to my phone and watch. I moved Lily's bedroom to the interior of the house, away from exterior walls and windows. The precautions might have seemed excessive to an outside observer, but my combat experience had taught me to take threats seriously, especially when they involved firearms and unstable individuals. As Lily slept, I sat at the kitchen table completing paperwork for a restraining order and finalizing documentation for the federal complaint Diana would file the next morning. Our home, which was supposed to be our sanctuary, now felt like a forward operating base in hostile territory. The irony was not lost on me. I had left war zones behind only to find a different kind of danger in suburban America. The legal proceedings began with formal complaints filed against both the HOA as an entity and Patricia Winters personally. Diana assured me the process was moving forward, but legal wheels turned slowly compared to the rapid escalation of Patricia's behavior. What began as bureaucratic harassment evolved into something far more sinister over the following weeks. Patricia seemed to materialize wherever Lily and I went. At the grocery store, I would turn down an aisle to find her examining products on shelves opposite Lily's wheelchair. At medical appointments, her car would be parked near the entrance when we exited. Once, while picking Lily up from a physical therapy session, I spotted Patricia sitting in the waiting room pretending to read a magazine, despite having no apparent reason to be there. Lily began noticing these coincidences as well. "Dad, Mrs. Winters was watching our house again from her car this morning when the school bus picked me up," she reported one evening. "She pretended to be checking her mail when she saw me looking, but she was definitely taking pictures with her phone." My security system captured this surveillance as well. Patricia driving past our house 6 times in a single day. Patricia walking her dog at unusually early or late hours, slowing precisely in front of our property. Once, at 11:37 p.m., motion sensors detected someone examining our new wooden ramp. The footage clearly showed Patricia testing its sturdiness with her foot while taking photos. Then the messages began appearing. The first was a printed note in our mailbox: "Neighborhoods have standards for a reason. Those who cannot maintain them should live elsewhere." No signature, but the implication was clear. 2 days later, another appeared: Accidents happen to people who do not follow the rules. The third was the most disturbing. Some disabilities are permanent, others can be created. I documented each message, adding them to the growing file of evidence. Diana advised filing police reports for the implied threats, which I did, though the responding officers seemed reluctant to view this as anything more than a neighborhood dispute. Without proof of who delivered the notes, they classified them as concerning but not actionable. Seeking allies, I carefully approached other HOA board members individually. Most were hesitant to speak openly, but through these conversations, a disturbing picture of Patricia emerged. She had been HOA president for 7 years, running unopposed after the previous board resigned en masse following disputes with her. One former member had found his professional reputation damaged after Patricia spread rumors about alcohol abuse. Another family discovered their loan application mysteriously denied after opposing her landscaping proposals. Robert Grayson, the elderly board treasurer, proved most forthcoming during our conversation at the local coffee shop. Patricia was not always this way, he confided, hands trembling slightly as he stirred his tea. The change came about 3 years ago after her husband lost his executive position. She channeled all her frustration into controlling the neighborhood. At first, it seemed like dedication to maintaining property values. But then, he glanced around nervously before continuing in a lower voice. The Martinez family had a therapy dog for their autistic son. Patricia claimed it violated pet restrictions despite medical documentation. When they fought back, she somehow discovered Mr. Martinez had a 20-year-old DUI that his employer did not know about. The information mysteriously reached his workplace. They moved away within 2 months. I asked why the board and neighborhood tolerated such behavior. Robert looked down, ashamed. Fear is a powerful motivator, Mr. Mitchell. Most of us are retired or have families. We cannot afford the stress of becoming her targets. You are different. You have faced real danger. The rest of us just want peaceful lives. His words stayed with me as Lily's anxiety worsened. Once outgoing and determined despite her physical challenges, she now jumped at unexpected sounds and asked to keep her bedroom curtains closed at all times. One night, I found her practicing wheeling herself into her closet, just in case someone breaks in. The psychological impact of feeling hunted in our own home was taking its toll on her. Then came the incident that confirmed my worst fears. While working in our kitchen, I glanced out the window to see Patricia engaged in a heated argument with Martin Cooper, whose family had recently installed a basketball hoop without prior approval. As Martin gestured angrily toward his property, Patricia took a step closer to him. Though I could not hear their words, her body language communicated clear intimidation. Then she opened her jacket enough to reveal what was unmistakably the grip of a handgun holstered at her waist. Martin's posture immediately changed from confrontational to retreating. He backed away toward his house as Patricia walked calmly back to hers. The deliberate display of the weapon sent ice through my veins. As a combat veteran, I recognized the intent behind such a gesture, not necessarily to threaten immediate violence, but to establish dominance through implied threat. It was a tactic I had seen warlords use during my deployments. That it was happening on a suburban street in America was surreal. That night, my security system alerted me to movement in our backyard. Through the camera feed, I watched Patricia methodically examining our windows and doors, testing for weaknesses in our home security. Her movements were not those of a curious neighbor, but of someone conducting reconnaissance. I activated the exterior lights remotely, illuminating her like an actor on stage. Rather than fleeing in embarrassment at being caught, She stared directly at the security camera for several seconds before walking unhurriedly back to the street. I called the police immediately, providing live video feed of the trespassing. 2 officers responded within 15 minutes. They took a report but seemed skeptical when I explained the ongoing situation. Mrs. Winters is a respected community leader, one officer explained awkwardly. She claims she was retrieving a paper that blew into your yard and got disoriented in the dark. Does retrieving paper require testing my daughter's bedroom window for weakness? I asked, replaying the footage that clearly showed her actions. The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Look, Mr. Mitchell," the senior officer said, "we understand you have military background and might be sensitive to perceived threats, but from our perspective, this looks like a neighborhood dispute that has gotten out of hand. We suggest mediation rather than escalation." They left after promising to keep an eye on the situation, but their dismissive attitude made it clear I could not rely on conventional protection. That night, I moved Lily's bed into my room and took turns sleeping and monitoring the security feeds. The muscle memory from combat deployments returned easily, the ability to rest while maintaining situational awareness, to wake fully alert at the slightest anomaly. As I watched over my sleeping daughter, I realized our situation had moved beyond legal disputes into something potentially life-threatening. Patricia's escalating behavior followed patterns I recognized from threat assessment training: increasing surveillance, testing boundaries, implied threats, and now direct reconnaissance of our home. Each step had been calculated to intimidate us into leaving without her having to resort to direct violence. But her frustration at our resistance was clearly pushing her toward more dangerous actions. What troubled me most was not the threat itself. I had faced far worse in combat, but that it was directed at Lily, who could not defend herself physically. My daughter's disability made her vulnerable in ways that simultaneously made me furious and terrified. As a father and protector, I found myself in the impossible position of needing to defend my child while remaining within the bounds of civilian law against someone exploiting those same systems to harass us. The restraining order hearing was still 10 days away. In military terms, we were in a holding pattern with deteriorating conditions on the ground. I needed to maintain our defensive posture while gathering intelligence and avoiding direct confrontation that could escalate the situation further. As dawn broke, I resolved to increase our security measures again and accelerate our legal proceedings. This was no longer about a wheelchair ramp or HOA regulations. It was about protecting my daughter from an increasingly dangerous threat. 3 days later, we received our first piece of good news in months. The judge reviewing our emergency motion for injunctive relief ruled in our favor, ordering the HOA to immediately approve our permanent wheelchair ramp installation pending final resolution of the case. Diana called with the update, her voice triumphant. The judge was not subtle in his opinion, Mr. Mitchell. He specifically cited the apparent pattern of discriminatory enforcement and troubling disregard for federal disability protections. Construction can begin tomorrow if you wish. I immediately arranged for contractors to start work on the permanent ramp. The crew arrived early the next morning, and by afternoon, the foundation was taking shape. Throughout the day, security cameras captured Patricia driving past our house repeatedly, slowing each time to observe the construction. Her expression through the windshield was stone cold, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. That evening, I received an automated alert that Patricia's car had parked down the street, just at the edge of my camera range. She remained there for over 2 hours, simply watching our house. The surveillance was becoming more brazen, as if she no longer cared about concealing her obsession with our family. The following morning, Lily noticed Patricia's car following her school bus. "Dad, she was 3 cars behind the bus the entire route," she reported during our evening call. "When I looked out the window, she pretended to be checking her phone, but she was definitely following us." I instructed Lily to stay inside the school building until I personally picked her up that afternoon. The school administration, already aware of our legal situation with the HOA, agreed to have a staff member escort her between classes. These precautions seemed extreme, but Patricia's behavior had become unpredictable enough to warrant such measures. Construction on our ramp continued through the week. Each day brought Patricia's presence, sometimes watching from her car, other times walking past with artificial casualness. Neighbors began to notice her obsessive monitoring of our home, creating a subtle shift in community dynamics. Where once people had averted their eyes from our situation, now they watched with growing concern as Patricia's behavior became increasingly difficult to ignore or rationalize. On Friday afternoon, I needed to pick up Lily's prescription from the pharmacy. The errand should have taken 20 minutes at most. I checked all security systems before leaving, confirming everything was functioning properly. Lily was set up in the living room with her homework and a direct line to my cell phone. At 15, she was responsible enough to be alone briefly, especially with our comprehensive security measures in place. I was at the pharmacy counter when my phone alerted me to movement at our front door. The security feed showed Patricia ringing our doorbell repeatedly, then peering through windows when no one answered. I immediately called Lily. "Dad, Mrs. Winters is at the door," she whispered. "She keeps ringing and knocking. Should I answer?" "Absolutely not," I instructed, already heading for my car. "Stay in the living room away from windows. I am on my way home." The drive back took 11 agonizing minutes. When I pulled into our driveway, Patricia's car was gone, but something was clearly wrong. Entering the house, I called for Lily and heard sobbing from the living room. I found her huddled in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face, her breathing rapid and shallow in a way that alarmed me instantly. "Sweetheart, what happened? Did she come inside?" I knelt beside her, checking for any signs of physical harm. "She saw me through the window," Lily gasped between sobs. She started yelling that I could hear her. When I did not answer the door, she went around to the side window and started screaming terrible things. I pulled up the security footage immediately. The side window camera had captured Patricia leaning close to the glass, her face contorted with rage as she shouted. Though the outdoor microphone caught only portions of her tirade, what was recorded chilled my blood. "You think you are special because you are in that chair. Your father cannot protect you forever. People like you are draining this community, making everyone accommodate your weaknesses. Do you know what happens to weak animals in nature?" The camera showed Lily wheeling herself away from the window in terror, as Patricia continued her verbal assault for nearly 2 minutes before departing. The timestamps indicated she had left just 3 minutes before my arrival. I held my trembling daughter, my mind racing with equal parts fury and tactical assessment. What had once been harassment had now become direct targeting of a disabled minor. Patricia had deliberately approached my daughter when she knew I was absent, isolating the most vulnerable member of our household for intimidation. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice still shaking, "she said people like me should not be living in nice neighborhoods, that I belong in a facility, that you and I are ruining everything she built here." That night, after ensuring Lily was finally asleep, I meticulously reviewed weeks of security footage. What emerged was not random harassment but a calculated pattern. Patricia had been testing our security systematically, identifying camera angles, observing our routines, probing response times. She had been conducting reconnaissance on our home with the precision of someone planning something far more serious than a property dispute. Most disturbing was footage from 3 separate nights showing Patricia testing different approaches to our house, identifying blind spots in our security coverage, and once attempting to open a side window I had deliberately left unlocked as a security test. Her behavior matched threat assessment protocols I had studied in the military, the methodical preparation that precedes direct action. The restraining order hearing was still 5 days away. Diana had expedited everything possible, but legal processes move at their own pace regardless of escalating danger. I considered relocating temporarily, but rejected the idea. Retreating would only delay the inevitable confrontation while surrendering the defensive advantages of familiar territory. 2 nights later, my security system alerted me to movement approaching our property from the north side, a deliberate approach that avoided our driveway sensors. Night vision cameras showed a figure moving with purpose toward our home. The image quality was clear enough to identify Patricia Winters, dressed in dark clothing and carrying something in her right hand, the unmistakable shape of a handgun. The timestamp read 8:43 p.m., precisely when Lily and I would normally be at her weekly physical therapy appointment. A last-minute cancellation from the therapist had kept us home, a schedule change Patricia could not have anticipated. She believed our house was empty as she approached the side door, testing the handle before moving to a window that had been left unlaced during construction work on the ramp. As I watched through the security feed, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Patricia Winters had moved beyond harassment to something far more dangerous. She was not just trespassing. She was attempting to enter our home while armed. Whatever her intentions, the presence of the weapon transformed this from a neighborhood dispute into an imminent threat to our safety. I checked the security of Lily's room one more time, ensuring she was safely isolated from any potential confrontation, before moving silently through our home to implement the defensive protocols I had hoped would never be necessary in civilian life. Years of training took over as I positioned myself strategically, all senses heightened to the danger now literally on our doorstep. The therapist's cancellation had been a blessing in disguise. Instead of being at the rehabilitation center as our schedule indicated, Lily and I were quietly at home, she watching a movie in her bedroom with headphones, me reviewing case documents in the garage that had been converted to a home office. Neither of us would have been visible from outside, leading Patricia to believe the house was empty as she approached. My security system sent silent alerts to my phone as she tested the side door handle, then moved methodically toward the partially open window in the sunroom. The construction crew had removed the old window earlier that day in preparation for installing a wider, wheelchair-accessible version. They had secured a temporary covering over the opening, but it would not present much obstacle to someone determined to enter. Through the security feed, I watched as Patricia removed the temporary covering and hoisted herself through the window opening with surprising agility. The night vision camera captured her surveying the sunroom before drawing a handgun from her jacket pocket. The deliberate way she checked the weapon indicated familiarity with firearms. This was not someone merely carrying for protection, but someone comfortable with the tool in their hand. I sent a text message to the police. Armed intruder in my home, 1437 Oak Ridge Drive. Security camera confirmation. My disabled daughter is in the house. Then I moved silently through our home, staying in the shadows as I had been trained, focused on positioning myself between Patricia and Lily's bedroom. Patricia moved with purpose through our house, not like someone exploring randomly, but like someone with a specific destination in mind. She headed directly toward Lily's bedroom at the back of the house. The realization that Patricia knew exactly where my daughter slept sent ice through my veins. She had been studying our home and routines more thoroughly than I had imagined. I reached Lily's door just before Patricia rounded the hallway corner. Positioning myself in the darkness of an adjacent room, I observed as she approached my daughter's bedroom, gun now held at the ready position that indicated she had some training. She hesitated at the door, listening for sounds, then slowly turned the handle. From inside, I heard Lily gasp as the door opened. The headphones had prevented her from hearing Patricia's approach. "Hello, Lily." Patricia's voice carried an unnatural calmness that was more terrifying than anger would have been. "Surprised to see me. You should be at therapy right now." "Mrs. Winters," Lily's voice trembled with confusion and fear. "What are you doing in our house? Where is my dad?" "Your father is not here to protect you right now," Patricia said, stepping fully into the room. "That is the problem with depending on others. Eventually, you find yourself alone." I could hear the fear in Lily's voice as she replied, "My dad will be home any minute. You need to leave our house." Through the slight opening between door and frame, I could see Patricia moving closer to Lily's wheelchair. The gun was now clearly visible in her hand, not pointed directly at my daughter but held where Lily could see it, a deliberate intimidation tactic. "This neighborhood was perfect before you came," Patricia continued, her voice eerily conversational despite the weapon in her hand. 15 years I spent building this community. 15 years maintaining standards, keeping property values high, creating something special. Then your father arrives thinking rules do not apply to him, demanding exceptions, modifications, special treatment. Lily reached slowly toward the emergency button on her medical alert bracelet. I had instructed her never to make sudden movements if threatened. Another sadly necessary lesson from my military experience that I had hoped she would never need. "The ramp is legal," Lily said, her voice steadier than I would have expected. "The judge already ruled." "The judge knows nothing about community standards," Patricia snapped, her calm facade cracking. "Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. One family cannot be allowed to destroy everything we built." Patricia raised the gun, not aiming directly at Lily but gesturing with it as she spoke. "Do you know what happens to neighborhoods when standards slip? First one exception, then another. Property values drop. The wrong kind of people move in. Everything falls apart." Lily pressed her medical alert button, sending a signal to my phone. Patricia noticed the movement and stepped closer, her expression darkening. "What did you just do?" she demanded, the gun now pointing more deliberately in Lily's direction. I had to act immediately. Using the silent entry techniques honed through years of special operations training, I moved into position. Patricia was now standing with her back partially toward the doorway, attention focused on Lily and whatever she had just activated. "She called me," I said calmly from the doorway. Patricia whirled around, the gun swinging wildly in her startled reaction. The weapon discharged, whether intentionally or from her finger tightening reflexively was impossible to tell. The bullet embedded itself in the wall inches from Lily's head. The sound was deafening in the confined space of the bedroom. What happened next occurred in the span of perhaps 3 seconds, though it seemed to unfold in slow motion through the clarity of combat-trained reflexes. As Patricia began to redirect the weapon, I closed the distance using precisely the movement patterns practiced countless times in close-quarters combat training. My left hand clamped around her wrist, forcing the gun upward and away from both Lily and myself. My right forearm created a lever point against her elbow joint, applying precisely calibrated pressure to force her hand open without breaking bones. The weapon clattered to the floor as Patricia gasped in shock and pain. In one continuous motion, I swept her legs, controlling her descent to the ground with my body weight properly distributed to immobilize without injury. Within seconds, she was face down, arms secured behind her back using zip ties I carried in my pocket, another precaution that had seemed excessive until this moment. The entire takedown had required no punches, no kicks, no chokeholds, just the precise application of leverage and momentum that neutralized the threat with minimal force. As I secured Patricia to prevent any further movement, I heard sirens approaching in the distance. "Lily, are you hurt?" I called over my shoulder, unwilling to take my attention fully off Patricia despite her secured position. "No," came her shaky reply. "The bullet did not hit me." Patricia struggled briefly against the restraints before going completely still, her voice suddenly cold and calculating. "You assaulted me. I am an invited guest who was startled by your aggressive approach. That is what happened here." "The security cameras recorded everything, Mrs. Winters," I replied calmly. "Your breaking and entering, the gun, your statements to my daughter, the shot fired, everything." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face as she processed the implications of being caught on video. The approaching sirens grew louder until flashing lights illuminated the bedroom window. Within moments, police officers were at our door, responding to both my text alert and the gunshot reported by neighbors. This time, the officers took the situation with appropriate seriousness. They entered with weapons drawn, securing Patricia and recovering her handgun from the floor. As one officer led her away, I could hear her already crafting alternative narratives, claiming she had seen a prowler, that she had come to check on Lily's welfare, that the gun had discharged accidentally when I startled her. The evidence told a different story. The bullet hole in the wall near my daughter's head, the security footage showing Patricia's methodical breaking and entering, the recorded threats. The police found no forced entry indicators except at the precise window Patricia had entered through. Most damning was the angle of the bullet trajectory, which forensics would later confirm could only have occurred if the shooter was facing Lily when the weapon discharged. As police secured the scene, I went to Lily and held her as she finally released the brave front she had maintained throughout the confrontation. She sobbed against my shoulder, her entire body trembling with delayed fear and shock. Over her head, I watched the officers lead Patricia to a patrol car, her face a mask of indignation even now. She had genuinely believed her position in the community would shield her from consequences, that her version of events would automatically be accepted over ours. Instead, she was placed in the back of a police cruiser, the neighborhood she had sought to control watching from windows and doorways as their HOA president was taken away in handcuffs. The officer taking my statement expressed what many were likely thinking. 23 years on the force, he said, shaking his head, and I have never seen an HOA dispute escalate to armed breaking and entering. Your security system likely saved your daughter's life, sir. As medical personnel arrived to check Lily for any injuries or shock, I realized how close we had come to tragedy. Patricia's obsession with control and authority had transformed from petty harassment to potentially deadly violence through a progression that, in retrospect, contained warning signs at every stage. The system had moved too slowly to prevent this confrontation, but at least now there would be no doubt about the seriousness of the threat she posed. The legal aftermath unfolded with surprising speed given the severity of Patricia's actions. She was charged with multiple felonies including breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and civil rights violations related to disability discrimination. The district attorney added charges after police executed a search warrant at her home. What they discovered shocked even those who had experienced Patricia's harassment firsthand. Her home office contained meticulously organized files on every family in the neighborhood, including photographs, personal information, and handwritten notes about vulnerabilities and pressure points that could be exploited in conflicts. My family's file was labeled Priority Target and contained detailed surveillance notes, copies of our daily schedules, and disturbing commentary about Lily's disability being exploited for special treatment. Most concerning were the multiple files of families who had moved away from the neighborhood following disputes with Patricia. Each contained similar patterns of escalating harassment and personal attacks. The Martinez family with their therapy dog, the Hendersons with their son's hospital bed, the Williams family with their basketball hoop. All had faced systematic campaigns designed to drive them away when they challenged Patricia's authority. The police also discovered 7 firearms in the home, only 3 of which were legally registered. Patricia's husband claimed ignorance of her activities, though investigators found this difficult to believe given the extensive nature of her files and behavior. 2 weeks after the incident, the remaining HOA board called an emergency neighborhood meeting. The clubhouse was packed with residents, many of whom had previously remained silent out of fear. Robert Grayson, now acting as interim board president, opened with a formal apology to our family. What happened to the Mitchell family represents a complete failure of our community governance, he stated, his voice steadier than I had ever heard it. Our board failed to check abuses of power and allowed discrimination against a disabled resident. We are implementing immediate policy changes to ensure this never happens again. The new policies included term limits for board positions, independent review of all violation notices, and specific protections for disability accommodations. Perhaps most significantly, the board announced the immediate approval of all pending modification requests that had been stalled under Patricia's leadership. As the meeting progressed, other families began sharing their own experiences. The dam of silence had broken, revealing Patricia's reign of intimidation had affected far more residents than anyone had realized. An elderly widow described being pressured to sell her home at below market value after her husband died because her gardening did not meet standards. A young couple revealed how Patricia had threatened to contact Child Protective Services when they built a backyard playground without prior approval. Each story reinforced what had become increasingly clear. Patricia's actions toward my family were not isolated incidents, but the escalation of a long-standing pattern of control and intimidation. That it had culminated in armed confrontation was shocking, but in retrospect, followed a logical progression of increasingly unhinged behavior when her authority was challenged. Court-mandated psychological evaluation revealed Patricia suffered from narcissistic personality disorder with paranoid features. The psychiatrist's report noted her profound sense of entitlement and inability to tolerate challenges to her authority, created a dangerous combination when paired with access to weapons. She was deemed competent to stand trial, but recommended for treatment during incarceration. For Lily, recovery came slowly but steadily. The trauma of having someone enter her bedroom with a gun left lasting effects, nightmares, anxiety about being alone, hypervigilance about doors and windows. We began therapy together, learning techniques to process the experience and rebuild her sense of safety. Surprisingly, the community became an essential part of that healing process. Neighbors who had once averted their eyes now brought meals, offered support, and most importantly, welcomed Lily openly. The elderly couple next door installed a connecting gate between our gardens so Lily could visit their therapy dog whenever anxiety struck. The high school shop class volunteered to build additional accessibility features for our home as a class project. 6 months after the incident, Lily was the guest of honor at a neighborhood celebration marking the completion of a community accessibility project. Sidewalk ramps at every intersection and braille signage throughout common areas. The initiative, spearheaded by Robert Grayson and unanimously approved by the new board, was named Lily's Legacy. As I watched my daughter cutting the ceremonial ribbon, surrounded by neighbors who now treated her disability not as an inconvenience but as an opportunity to create a more inclusive community, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. The battle I had fought was different from my military deployments, but no less important. Not a fight for territory, but for dignity, for the right of my daughter to access her own home without harassment or fear. Patricia Winters eventually accepted a plea deal resulting in 5 years imprisonment followed by extensive probation and permanent loss of firearm privileges. The neighborhood she had sought to control through fear had transformed in her absence, becoming stronger through inclusivity rather than exclusion, finding unity in supporting its most vulnerable members rather than targeting them. For Lily and me, the house that had briefly become a battleground returned to what we had originally sought: a home, a sanctuary, a place of peace. The wheelchair ramp that had sparked the conflict became just another feature of the neighborhood, unremarkable except for the flowers Lily planted along its edges that bloomed each spring, transforming what had been a point of contention into something beautiful that everyone could enjoy.